You want to get a 40 plus in VCE English language. Well, here's how you do it. And in this video in particular, I'm going to show you how to get a perfect score in section A of the exam using the 2023 VCAA paper. Now, if it's your first time here, my name's Sepanta. I'm one of the tutors on the Eng Lang Pro team, and we all scored in the top 1% of the subject, ready to help you excel by really breaking everything down into clear step-by-step instructions and templates that you can use to really help you become, one, an excellent communicator, but to also get you that score that you need for you to get into your dream university course. That said, let's jump into the video. As you can see, on the right side, I've got the transcript, and on the left side, I've got the questions from the exam. I want to show you how I think and perceive the transcript and how I articulate myself to give you a guide on, how do you respond to these questions flawlessly, right? So let's get into it. First and foremost, we've got identify one semantic field or domain of this discourse and list two supporting linguistic examples. Well, I'm straight away going to get onto this transcript and read top to bottom. Well, okay, Melbourne Airport. Okay, so it's about airports. I've got airport here, runway, airport, again and again. Federal Minister, infrastructure. Okay, I'm seeing airport again, and I'm seeing runways again. Right, so really what that screams to me is aviation. So I'm not going to waste time because SAQs are all about efficiency and succinctness. So a semantic field of this newsletter, and notice how I'm specific about it being a newsletter, is aviation, full stop. It's 2 marks, so let's break it down into at least 2 sentences to give the examiner reason to give us a mark per sentence at the very least, right? I need 2 supporting examples. And linguistic examples means it can be from any subsystem, but the easiest one to use here is just some form of, lexeme like a noun, right? So this is displayed by the nouns airport on line 1 and runway, which is on line 5. Full stop. I've got the marks that I need. No need to waste any more time. Let's move. Question 2, discuss the function. Okay, so is it the Jakobson functions like referential, conative, metalinguistic, poetic, phatic, and so on? And or do you want me to talk about the function of the syntactic features? Well, why not both to make sure we're safe? And further to that, between lines 43 and 70, so don't forget that they're putting limits, right? And when I see syntactic features, I'm instantly thinking sentence types: interrogative, exclamative, declarative, imperative. Okay, and in 43 to 70 is on the right here in this little flowchart section. But the only full sentences I can see are down the bottom. Okay, and I don't want both of my examples to be sentence types because I want to impress the examiner by having variation in case they're going to nitpick and say, oh no, you can't have both sentence types in one question and so on, and things like that, right? The next easiest thing for me to talk about, normally for me personally, and you got to figure this out for yourself, is nominalization. So I've got development, I've got construction, right? That draws me in. Let's talk about them one by one. So let me quote this imperative sentence, and don't forget your line numbers, right? So the syntactic feature of an imperative sentence is utilized in join the conversation on our website. And that's line 70. I'm going to put a full stop. And let's say how it functions. Well, an imperative sentence gives someone an instruction, right? The use of this imperative sentence functions conatively to elicit a response from the audience aiming to increase reader feedback through the website, given that Melbourne Airport can benefit from honest feedback. Now, how else might it function? It kind of also functions phatically because it's inviting them to close their social distance with Melbourne Airport and the newsletter. It simultaneously functions phatically by encouraging, or it simultaneously has a phatic function. We don't want to write anything incorrectly so that examiners don't have reason to not give us the marks. Simultaneously has a phatic function by encouraging readers to close their social distance and engage with Melbourne Airport's newsletter directly. Now, I also need another example because it's 4 marks, which means I need 4 distinct sentences 2 examples and 2 analyses in 2 mini paragraphs, like so. So next we said I'm going to talk about nominalization, construction and development, 54 and line 61. So let's talk about it. The use of nominalization, development, 54, and construction on line 61, functions referentially, aiming to inform and clarify readers regarding the chronological timeline of Melbourne Airport's new project. Full stop. And really, we want to talk about the actual syntactic function of nominalization, which the use of the syntactic feature of nominalization here exploits the abstract nature of verbs, to develop and to construct. And what does that actually do? Well, by doing that, utilizing the noun form, which Haydn's register or Haydn's formality, given the serious nature of a construction project, that affects the lives of Melbourne residents. Full stop, right? I've got 2 really solid paragraphs, on to the next. Now, 2 features, so anything at all that contributes to coherence, okay? Now, when I think about coherence, I'm thinking logical ordering, I'm thinking formatting, I'm thinking inference, I'm thinking consistency and convention, and if I'm really stuck, I can also talk about cohesion, right? But that's lower priority because we have some beautiful features that we can find that are directly linked to coherence anyway. Alrighty, so let's talk about that. Clearly, when I'm looking at this text, it's very logically ordered, right? Perfectly, because it's got subheadings. And I can talk about that by quoting these 2 subheadings. So I can say the use of bold formatted subheadings. And why should I say that? Because formatting in itself is a feature of coherence. And so I'm kind of killing 2 birds with 1 stone here. So the use of bold formatted subheadings in the declarative exclamative, we hear you, right? On line 29, an interrogative, ever considered a career in aviation? On line 37, and what does that do? Segment the text or the newsletter into distinct sections regarding, surveys for the airport, as well as the necessity to recruit new personnel at the airport. Full stop. Thus, logically ordering the newsletter with an aim of coherence and clarity for ease of navigation and comprehension, right? And these are kind of the key words that examiners want to see to prove that you really understand what coherence is all about. Next, I can talk about inference if we're thinking about, new north-south, because, north-south implying it's either from the north to the south of the airport or north to the south of Melbourne and so on and so on. But I'm going to try and show you guys what to do if you're really stuck and you can only really talk about a cohesive feature, right? And in this case, let's do it about repetition. So the cohesive feature of repetition seen in the use of the noun, or rather, I could say, the repetition of the noun runway. And let's quote all the lines that we can see it in, or a few. Line 5, line 13, where else? And 15. 5, 13, and 15. Normally 3 is enough to say that it's being repeated. Establishes cohesive ties across the newsletter, reinforcing the key idea that this text is all about Melbourne Airport's construction. Melbourne Airport's construction. Now, by establishing cohesive ties and reiterating this key concept of aviation throughout the newsletter, ease of comprehension and clarity is aided hence contributing to overall coherence. Done. It's 4 marks. We've got 2 solid mini paragraphs and 2 solid examples with 2 associated analyses, and we can call it a day. Now, question 4, the jugular question, the juggernaut of short answer, the 5 marker, which is a pretty big deal. Now, 5 markers are marked almost like mini ACs. So it's pretty serious. We need to take it seriously, right? Which means let's try and treat it with 3 mini paragraphs, 3 unique examples, and 3 attached analyses in those examples. Now, make sure you address every aspect of the question. So here, the register needs to support 2 social purposes. So first, we need to think about the overall registers of this letter. Now, a lot of VCAA examiners disagree on whether register is about formality, informality, or things like a broadcast register, an occupational register, an advertising register. So to be safe, let's do both, right? So the register of this newsletter is majority formal with brief instances of informality. And simultaneously, this newsletter has a formal broadcast register, an informal advertising register, and a formal occupational register, right? Contributing to social purposes such as clarification and rapport building, right? And now we'll get into it. So I've kind of laid out my response for the examiner, for the 5 marker, to really show them, first of all, I know what I'm talking about, so that when they're looking through your exam, among 200 other papers that they have to mark throughout the year, you make it easy for them. You make it easy for them to appreciate your response and give you the marks that you deserve. So let's get into it. Let's go in the order that I've signposted, right? So a formal broadcast register. And why is that? Because this is a public-facing, informative newsletter. Let's talk about it. And it has a conventional opening, which welcomes you to the second community newsletter. That is broadcasting to the world very formally through a conventional opening. The use of a conventional opening, welcome to the second ... and we can do line 4, establishes a formal broadcast register due to the public-facing and informative nature of this newsletter, let's say, of this newsletter, full stop, right? Now let's talk a bit about how this might link to a set of social purposes, right? This broadcast register serves to introduce the newsletter to readers who may be interested in Melbourne Airport or aviation, with the goal to inform and clarify important details regarding, future construction. Full stop. Now, let's go to the next example that we had. We said there's an informal advertising register because they're trying to convince people to sign up and work at Melbourne Airport. Okay, so let's talk about line 37. It's short answer. So different examiners might be marking different questions, and even in general, you are allowed to repeat examples and line numbers across questions because they're all separate entities. So the use of, let's say, the use of the interrogative sentence, right? The use of the interrogative sentence, ever considered a career in aviation, on line 37, which has ellipsis of have you at the beginning, because it doesn't say have you ever considered a career in aviation, it just says ever considered a career in aviation, lowers the formality and utilizes an advertising register, right? This is due to the fact that Melbourne Airport may have, or has a higher probability of successfully drawing in applicants for recruitment if they build rapport and close social distance by utilizing almost an informal tenor, an informal and friendly tenor, we could say, right? Full stop. So we've said build rapport, we've said close social distance, there are social purposes. We've got our example. We've linked it to register. We're good. Now, just to really, hammer the nail into the coffin and get the 5th mark and stand out in Victoria, let's go for that final formal occupational register, which is very easy to talk about when there's any jargon at all. Now, I love seeing phrases that I have no idea what the meaning of can possibly be. Like scope 1 and 2 and scope 3, I have no idea what that means. Maybe my friends who do, aviation engineering might know what that means. I have no idea what that means. So let's talk about it. The use of formal occupational jargon establishes an occupational register through noun phrases, scope 1 and 2, which is on line 19, and scope 3, which is on line 20, full stop. Now, let's think about this, right? By utilizing highly jargonistic language, Melbourne Airport establishes their expertise and authority, and we can even say expertise, credibility, and authority. So now we've talked about our purposes, and we've got discussion on register through formal and occupational, and let's elaborate now, right? And what does that really do? Well, why is that? Because given the serious nature of a large-scale runway project that concerns the aviation demands of millions of people every year, full stop. And we might say, we've answered that, and that mini paragraph's good enough. And if you want to go a step further, then feel free. But at this stage, I wouldn't waste any more time. Beautiful. So in about 15 or 16 minutes altogether, what have we done? We've answered every question. I've shown you my thinking process, kind of, how we actually approach, short answer sections and section A's, and how we read questions and how I look and what I look for naturally. And it's very, very important that we treat these sections with utmost pragmatism. Don't waste time, be clinical, give the examiners reason to pay you marks. So if I'm going to show you where my marks came from, I would have gotten a mark at the end of this sentence, and at the end of this sentence, feel free to pause the video as I go. I would have gotten a mark for identifying here, and by the end of my analysis here, a mark at the end of this sentence. Notice how I make it easy for examiners to justify giving me marks. And I would have gotten a mark at the end of this sentence, at the very least, at the end of this sentence. Same at the end of this paragraph, same after this sentence. And this question 5 would be marked holistically compared to the other 200 exam papers that examiners also mark. And out of every batch of 200, normally only 4 students score 5 out of 5. So in order for you to be at that level, you need to have unique takes by some measure. You need to have a unique articulation of the way that you describe what's happening in the newsletter, and you will stand out. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to us at englangpro.com. You can book a trial. We've got over 100 videos. We've got our own textbook. We've got Raw 50 masterclasses, over 11 hours of weekly live tutoring for every single one of our students if they need it, so on, where we correct your work and I personally teach you. Beautiful. I hope this video was helpful. And yeah, let us know if you want further support.